Today, I'm delighted to be able to welcome a new guest to the show who will be very familiar to most of you. I want to thank my friend Giuseppe Fafangulo for setting this one up and getting us both in touch. He is Stefan Verstappen. Let's bring him up right now. Stefan, are you with me?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you on. Your work that I've been following for a few years now, and you're now regular every Friday, final hour on this show, which regular listeners to this show know is my favourite. And I pick it up on the download. I'm a subscriber, so it gives me something to start off my Saturdays with that I can always rely on. So there's so much we can go through. You do all these video presentations, how it will go down is probably about the best known that I'm aware of. But you also talk about things like the check-in club, which actually forms part of a wider narrative that Stefan's going to go into for us today, because we've had a chat before we started recording. But before we do that, whenever I have a new guest on, I always ask the same question as you, the audience, know, and that is if you would go into your background in as little or as great a detail as you would like. Over to you, Stefan.
Yeah, okay. So, well, I don't like talking about my background because, I just have a natural humility and shyness. But, anyways, I am finally discovered that what I really am is a Renaissance man. And that is somebody that tries to master as many different arts and sciences as possible. And I've been like this for, since I was a young child. I'm a I'm a registered artist with the Canadian Council for the Arts. I've worked in hundreds of mediums and produced hundreds of works of art, and even been awarded awards for my artworks, for example, in Ventura, California, my public artwork. So I'm an artist, I'm a musician, I'm a martial arts expert, and I taught martial arts and continue to teach martial arts for the last 40 years. I actually moved and lived in China for 4 years, studying Kung Fu under two of the greatest Kung Fu masters in China. But I'm also an outdoor survivalist and aficionado. I'm an expert canoeist and a wilderness expert. I used to teach wilderness survival skills and outdoor skills for the Toronto Boys Home. I also have an interest in medicine. I was an instructor for St. John Ambulance, and I even won several awards for my participation in simulated disaster rehearsals that we used to conduct in accordance with St. John Ambulance and the regular ambulance service and fire department. And I won a couple of awards for my participation in doing that. I was almost introduced to the Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau, father of the current psychopath in power, and for my work in community organizing. I know I'm all over the place now, but I was part of a small community of people that worked in the housing projects here in Toronto, and we had put together and run so many successful programs that our name was getting into the local newspapers. And so finally I got a phone call from one of the MPs in Ottawa saying that the Prime Minister wants to meet you. The whole thing fell apart. Of course, the Liberals, the Democrats shut us all down. I had no idea why, but now that I'm older and wiser, I understand that the reason the Liberals shut us down was because we were actually doing some good, and that can't be tolerated. And I'm also something of a scientist. I experiment with a lot of different things. I've been experimenting for a long time with frequency, sound, light, electromagnetic frequencies, and to see if they were able to improve your ability to think and increase your effectiveness as a human being. So I have interest in many wide variety of areas, but the most important thing that I have always tried to live my life according to is truth and virtue. And we live in an age of constant lies and deception. And because of my martial arts background, because I believe the way of the warrior is the only solution now to the problems we face as a society, because a warrior is strong and has critical thinking and obeys their own internal logic and morality. They're not given orders to do things, they act out of their own virtue. And this is what we need. We all need to act according to our virtue and according to our understanding of truth. I've been fighting this New World Order cabal for at least 40 years. I've been against this for a long time. I've fought it my whole life, speaking the truth and trying to get people deprogrammed from our society. The programming inflicted on us by media and education and our culture, which just ruins the spirit and minds of most people that are born and raised in this civilization. And so here we are. We're coming towards the end of it, and I'm still fighting.
Yes, indeed. And 40 years, that's a tremendous period of time. I only really started to wake up in I think about 2001, if that. So probably, I'm looking at less than 20 years around that time. It's interesting what you said about your meeting with Pierre Trudeau was torpedoed by the left, because it immediately reminded me of a guest I've had on a few times, a well-known, what would you call him, cartoonist, political satirist, Ben Carson. He was down to meet President Trump, and then they came out the left and said, oh, he talks about the Rothschilds and stuff like that, and so he wasn't part of that meeting anymore. So they certainly have their eyes on different people, and they want to keep different people away from people in power. It's just astonishing, the sort of level of censorship. And although it's more overt and clear now, for people like yourself, you've been victims of it for a lot longer than the term cancel culture even was a term.
Yeah.
But that being said, where would you like to? I mean, I was very interested in. I'll give you an example of what happened to me with the Checking Club, because I heard you and Jeff talking about it a few times, and I promoted it on this show a few times because it's such a wonderful concept. I used to go out with. There were some people from work, probably going back over 20 years ago, and then I left, and then I went back there probably about 15 years ago. And they tended to be a bit older. Some of them passed away now. And there was one guy who was a groundsman, and there was something you can't it's difficult to say what it is. There's something just not quite right about him, which they were made aware of when he was employed. But he can be a bit irritating, but he's also got a heart of gold. And I was around a place where he goes to the pub. I have no phone number, no contact information for him. So I had an idea for a while that I would go over and try and see if I could, see him in the pub the time he used to go in. And a few weeks ago I did. And so I got a drink and sat down and had a chat with him for half an hour. And, he lives on his own. And I plan to do the same again soon. So that was certainly inspirational for me. I wouldn't have thought of that had you not brought up the Checking Club. But how would you like to lead us into the Checking Club? Because as I mentioned earlier, you said to me off air that it's part of a wider project. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, let me talk about the Checking Club first, and then I'll step back and explain how that fits into another wider program that I've been trying to develop. So I work with a good friend of mine is a medical doctor who lives in California. He's an emergency room doctor, and he wrote a book on how to extend your lifespan, how to live longer and stay healthier. Now, I know there's a lot of books on that type of subject, but he actually traveled the world, and he went to what they were calling the blue zones, which are areas in the world where villages or districts within the world where people typically live to be 100, 110, 120 years old. And not only do they live that old, but they don't have all the diseases that elderly people typically get. They live to be 100, but they don't have arthritis, they don't have Alzheimer's, they don't have dementia, they don't have diabetes. They're healthy until they drop dead at 110. So he was trying to figure out what is the common element to all of these communities, and many people have done this research. They thought it was the wine they drank, or maybe it was the food they ate, or maybe there was something in the air that they were breathing, or some kind of activity that they all performed that allowed them to live to this age. And they can't find any commonality. They study the food, the water, the wine, and there is no commonality between it. And so we have to wonder, what is the one thing that they all have in common that allows them to live so long? And the only thing left after you eliminate the food and the water and their lifestyle, the one thing that is common among all of them is that they all belong to communities. They all were born and raised and grew up within a big family, a loving family, and they lived in a village where they knew everybody. And not only that, they got together with each other almost on a daily basis. They all got together for lunch or for dinner every day, and they talked about their lives and they celebrated. And yeah, they had some wine. The food they ate was pretty good. It wasn't, they didn't get together and order McDonald's. They had good bread and they had good vegetables and fruits and that. Something every and all of us can have access to. So the only common element was they were part of a community, a close-knit community, people that cared for each other, that got together, joked and laughed and told stories. And is this the secret to a long life? Well, now we look at people that live isolated, and look what's been happening lately. The governments all over the world have gone full bore into making sure people do not get together, making sure that people do not associate with each other, that they can't eat at the restaurant. You can't have friends over for your birthday dinner, for crying out loud. Why do you think the government is doing that? Because the counterindication for this long life and to ensure that people die a lonely, miserable life at an early age is to isolate them. And that is part of what I'm calling the global democide program. We've never seen anything like this in the history of humanity. The entire world, the governments of the entire world are cooperating and conspiring together to murder billions of people. Make no mistake about it. This is what this is all about. Never mind, it's to make money, or it's to keep people safe, or we're worried about people's health. It's got nothing to do with it. What it does have to do with is global democide. They are really trying to kill us. And part of that program is to isolate us and separate us from each other. So we now know that being part of a community is what makes you live long, and it also is what prevents diseases, especially diseases that Dr. Ronald Kapp says is associated. All these diseases is really just a symptom of one disease, and that one disease is aging. And that disease can be tackled and cured. You don't have to age. You don't have to get all these diseases and then die from cancer and all this. We expect that. We think that is the normal course of life, but it's not the normal course of life. So I began researching that because I'll bring this back to the larger project, but I began researching simply the fact that, is it true that if you're an older person and you have a community, you'll live longer? Well, I came across tons of articles and essays and research papers and TED Talks that show unequivocally that the simple act of phoning a senior person and a lot of seniors live alone in seniors buildings. And I know I've seen them myself. Everybody says, I got to have kids because I don't want to be alone when I get older. Really? Well, go to a seniors building and see how many kids are visiting their parents there. Very few. Maybe twice a year. Christmas and birthdays. They come over for an hour, boom, then they're gone. And the rest of the year, all these people live alone and they're isolated and they don't speak to anybody and nobody comes over and nobody calls them and nobody gives a flying fluck. So, small wonder that they die. Small wonder, because what they have no reason to live anymore, because when we are herd animals. Our basic instinct is to be among other people. That's what we need. That's what, you know, 1.5 million years of evolution has created in us, the need to be a part of a community. And when older people are segregated and isolated into seniors' homes or retirement homes, they start to die because what else do they got to live for? Now, they've already shown through these studies that by the simple act of phoning, or look, best case scenario would be to visit in person. But nowadays, that's not often possible, mostly not possible. But the second best thing would be to phone these people once a day and say, "Hey, Bill, how you doing? How's the medication going? How's the arthritis? And are you eating all right? Anything new? What do you think about the latest hockey score?" You know, just the simple act of somebody calling for 10 minutes. It's only 10 minutes, 5, 10 minutes. Checking in on them, asking them some questions. How you doing? Is there anything you need? Is there anything I can do? Should I come over and bring some spaghetti or some fresh vegetables? Or just that very act has proven through numerous studies to reverse Alzheimer's, reverse arthritis, reverse diabetes, and reverse dementia, and prevent depression and suicide and cancer. That's all it takes. A 10-minute phone call once a day is all it takes. It's better than all the prescription drugs that you're prescribed. It's better than all the trips to the hospital and all the surgeries. All of that can be prevented simply by getting in touch with people and saying hello. So how important is that? How big is that? So that's the check-in club, Andy.
That's really, really interesting, and it's something that we could all do. You know, those of you listening around the world, think about these people on their own, and there are so many of them. And I was quite reassured by what you say. I feel sorry for people who do have family, and they hope that they would look after them in their old age, and they rarely see them. I don't have any children. I have no plans to do so. I have a mother and a girlfriend, and then most of my friends I've made through doing shows like this, Stefan. This is kind of a social outlet because I do 6 a week, including my appearance on David's show, and this is where I get to talk to people like yourself. And it's like a conversation. And the friends that I think the oldest friend I've got, I first met in the mid 1990s, and we still communicate now and then. But what you and many of my other friends who've appeared on the show and people listening have come to realise, especially now with the COVID thing, it's become even more apparent. If you don't go along with the mainstream narrative, your friends that haven't already dropped you, that go back many years, or family members as well in some cases, are likely to do so now. So really, this is another important time for people with our way of thinking who are awake to what's going on, to try and communicate with each other, but also to be aware. Don't be fed posting, or don't be led into anything, because these people, they've got their own agents that want to infiltrate people who know the truth to try and get them into trouble or what have you, or disrupt their communication because they want you isolated, as you well pointed out. Stefan, back to you.
Yeah. So the solution to this is really simple, and that is to form a community of people, and you don't have to do anything. It's just you have to, get together with like-minded people. And you're right, people like me. Listen, I don't have a friend left here in this country. They all dropped me, and family. I never had family either, and I still don't have family. So I'm just as isolated and alone as everybody else, because like I said, I've always sought the truth. But whoa, guess what? People don't want to hear the truth. And anybody that goes around speaking the truth, well, they're going to get persecuted. They don't want nothing to do with you. They don't want to hear the truth. And they feel threatened by the fact that you want to know the truth, that makes them feel threatened. And so now you're a threat to them, an existential threat to their being or something, or their personality, or I don't know. It's all so petty. If these people had a real soul, they wouldn't be threatened, but they don't have a real soul. So all these superficial little pretenses that everybody lives their lives behind, and that becomes threatened, and then they don't want nothing to do with you. The check-in club is simply get together with a group of people. You can do it online first, and just contact them and offer this service. And we use what we call a telephone tree. So every day I would call two people, and those two people would call two people, and those two people would call two people, and then everybody on our list. We can cover 50 people in 10 minutes, right? And everybody has a phone number and the name of the person, and and then you just call them. That's all it is. Just give them a call and introduce yourself and learn a little bit about them and check in on them. And if you do that, and you can set how often you want to do this. Is it once a week? Is it once a day? Once every 3 days? But you got to set up this community, and it's an ad hoc community. You don't need to incorporate or register it or anything like that. You can just put up a web page somewhere and say, listen, people that are interested in being part of our check-in club, please register here, name, phone number, age, and we'll put you on the list. That's it. And then we all take turns checking in on each other. And that alone will provide a lot of benefits, and especially for those of us, and it's actually most of us, and the listeners of your show, you know them, and I know them, and you folks know yourself. You're on your own. I know you're out there, and I know you're by yourself, because I do some consulting, and everybody that that calls me for a preparedness consultation, I talk to them and I ask them the same questions. Do you have family? Do you have friends? And how many people around you support you? And it's always the same. Yeah, they have family, but the family doesn't support them, won't talk to them anymore. The family ran out and got the death. And no, they used to have friends, but the friends ran out and got the death. And now they won't have nothing to do with them. And their own children ran out and got the death and won't have anything to do with them. And their own parents ran out, got the death, won't have anything to do with them. I mean, those of us that are awake to the truth are a very, very, very small minority in the world. And there are many of us, but we are spread out across the planet, and we are very few and far between. So I don't have anybody within 100 miles that I could talk to. I don't. And most of you and most of the people I've spoken to, it's the same story. There's nobody you can talk to. Nobody gets where you're at. Nobody wants to hear, what you think about the current events, because, you're probably leaning a little bit too close to the truth, to the actual reality of what's going on in the world, and people will avoid you like the plague. So that's the importance of having this check-in club, so that we can call each other and say, look, how are you doing? And that way, we don't feel all alone, that we're the only one in town that's not running to the hospital to get something stuck in our arms, and that we're not the only one that thinks there is something seriously wrong with our civilization. And the very fact that somebody calls you gives you moral support. Because we are in a battle. I did a video a few years ago. We are at war. Make no mistake, we are at war. We're taking heavy casualties. Everybody that dies from a drug overdose is a casualty of this war. Everybody that commits suicide is a casualty of this war. Everybody that drinks themselves to death is a casualty of this war. And it's nonstop. And we need allies. And part of this war is a spiritual war. As I'm sure you know, we are in a spiritual battle as well, and we need moral support. And that's what I hope to, spread the information about this check-in clubs. This will give each other moral support. No, you're not alone. Keep going. It will get better. We'll get through this. They're not going to win. Good and virtue will triumph in the end, and let's stay in touch and support each other.
Very well said, Stefan, and I'm just looking at your website, folks. This is chinastrategies.com. That's chinastrategies.com. There will be a link, and it says at the top, Renaissance Man, the complete works of Stefan Verstappen. And when you mentioned that term earlier, it reminded me with some sadness of my good friend Dr. Adrian Krieg, who passed away late last year. He was in his 80s, but it was still unexpected after a surgical procedure. And he wrote his autobiography, which I'm looking at the cover now, I brought it up on my computer, was called The Ordinary Life of a 20th Century Renaissance Man. And so that reminded me of Adrian there. But what can you tell us about your website? What sort of things? There's a lot on there I can see that you've talked about with regard to your background. Where's the best place for people to start? Obviously, you've got the front page, but what would you like to draw people's attention to?
Oh yeah, well my website is a mess, and a lot of people think because the term China strategies, I'm somehow associated with China. I'm not. I have nothing to do with the CCP. The website came as a result of the publication of my very first book, which is called The 36 Strategies of Ancient China, which is a military history book on ancient Chinese strategies. Because I studied ancient China because they have had a functioning civilization for longer than most civilizations, and as a result, they have become very, very ruthless. The ancient Chinese were the most ruthless people on the planet. And I wanted to study this because, we are often very naive, most of us. We don't understand how evil and cunning and scheming the powers that be are. Most people don't get it. They don't understand this kind of thinking. They're psychopaths. And by the way, I have a very popular video called Defense Against the Psychopath. It's gone viral with over 500,000 views, I'm sure, by now. But if you want to understand why the world is the way it is watch my video, Defense Against the Psychopath. People don't understand that, and what I wanted to do was learn this in order to defend myself against it. It's the saying, forewarned is forearmed. And just like the famous Chinese strategist Sun Tzu wrote in his book, The Art of War, to know your enemy is to win every battle. So let's know our enemy. What does our enemy do? Well, our enemy uses strategies and tactics that are diabolical. So my first book is on ancient Chinese strategies, and oh my God, they're pretty diabolical. But once you get a hold of that, you can now start to see how these strategies and tactics, this diabolical scheme, is being used against us, against you and me, right now. They're using it on us. And if you are awake to it, you can fight against it. If you're not awake to it, you will forever be a victim of this type of manipulation and scheming. So the book came out in 1999, and everybody said, well, you should get a website. So I went, okay, China Strategies, because that's the title of the first book. I never changed this. I never got another website. I should have registered Stefan the Warrior or, Stefan the Great One or something like that, .com. So I just kept it the same URL as I always had. But what I did is I put everything I do is on there. So it's a mishmash. I got all my art is on there. If you want to see my paintings and my public arts installations and my sculptures and my stained glass windows, and it's all on there. If you want to see all my books, I've written 8 books. They're all on there. My articles, I've written articles for a wide variety of publications, from the Trends Journal to Black Belt Magazine. That's on there. If you want to see videos about Kung Fu and the Way of the Warrior, that's on there. And also the other thing I've become, since I was a young boy, I've always been a survivalist. That was in the days before they coined the term prepper. I still like survivalist better. And so I've always been a survivalist. So all my videos and thoughts and writings on how to survive, how to prepare for the end of the world, which is coming soon, that's on there. And then I've always been a nature lover. I love canoeing. I love nature. I love mountain biking. So all my mountain biking and nature videos are on there. I mean, it's a big mishmash. However, this mishmash has kept me from being banned by social media because they don't know what to make of me. Their algorithms can go through my website and they can't peg me as a anti-government spokesperson, which is really what I am. Well, I'm anti-evil spokesperson, so government is evil. Ipso facto, I am against the government. But they can't peg me that way. The same thing with my YouTube channel. I mean, I have videos on cardinals and videos on canoeing down a river and videos on how evil leftists are and then videos on kung fu, you know. So when the algorithm goes through there, they don't get what I am. And a lot of people won't get what I am, but that's a good thing.
It's funny because I just actually clicked on the art section of the website and I clicked on watercolors. Now, I know absolutely nothing about art and I was terrible at art at school. In fact, an exam that you take when you're 16 years old, your first exam that would go on your resume or your CV, whatever you call it, I did graphic design because I was told it was more about marketing and I was more interested in that side of things. I wasn't told because they try and get to recruit as many people for their classes because otherwise the teacher can't run them if they don't get many people. And then I found you did have to know about art and I got a grade F. So pretty bad. But I just looked at watercolors. You see, when I think of watercolors, I think of these things that are all a bit blurry and things, and I've never really been impressed by them. But I'm looking at this one of House in Palgrave, and then looking down below at these others, and these are really these look really nice. They're really they've got a lot of life to them. They're very precisely done. You know, it's not all sort of some blurry sort of image. So no, these really do look good, I have to say. I'll have a bit of a hunt through these. So, folks, this website. I mean, as Stefan has said, I didn't know anything about his involvement in things like art and the martial arts and different things. So I'm going to certainly have spend a bit of time later on when I've got everything done to have a bit of a look through this because it looks very interesting. And it's always what I find. I mean, I've always been the Satan man, and you talk about your website, chinastrategies.com, and how you got the title. I set up my website, and it was a one-page website with a PayPal button. Of course, I haven't had that for years. On there, that people could buy the book that I'd literally got printed locally, about 15 years ago. I see the background, how you ended up with chinastrategies.com, because that's very similar to how I originally set up my website, which was named, again, like yourself, after my first book. I've only done a couple. But yeah, that's interesting. And what I'd like to move on to now is another thing that came up in our pre-show chat was you said we are all going to be disappearing soon. And of course, that's quite an ominous statement, but we know in the UK that they've been jailing people and what have you. And there's all sorts of other things that we've heard about. We know the FEMA camps in America, they've not built those years ago for nothing, okay? They've got a purpose. And when we see what's going on over there, and it looks like that purpose is becoming all the more clear. So that statement, we are all going to be disappearing soon, how would you explain that, Stefan?
We are under a communist regime now. In my talks and my videos, my stories, how it will go down seems to be quite popular. I try to predict the future and tell it in a story form so that people can understand what happens during these types of times. But we're under a communist, socialist type of tyranny. And what happens under socialism and communism consistently in every country it's ever infected is people start disappearing. I came out with a with a video saying that I signed my death warrant when I was in college because I used to draw a monthly cartoon strip for the college newspaper, the Winter's Seer, and I lampooned college life, and I worked at the pub in on campus, and So my cartoon strip was about the wasted students that hung out at the pub, and that very fact that when I published those cartoons put me on a list for execution. It did. Because when the communists take over, the first thing they do is they try to round up and murder all the intelligentsia. They round up the professors, they round up the writers, they round up the poets, and the painters, and the artists, and the dancers, and the cartoonists, and the storytellers, and anybody that has any degree of intelligence and creativity. That's who the communists murder first. So we are, and I have been since college, on the murder list. Make no mistake about it. When I started publishing cartoons in the college paper, that put me on the list for when the time comes, when the communists seize full control, I will be near the top of the list for people that need to be exterminated, because that's what they've done all the time throughout history. That's what they did, during the Red Terror in Russia. That's what they did in Poland and Lithuania and Albania and Bulgaria and China and Vietnam and Cambodia and Honduras and Cuba. Everywhere communism has infected, they first round up basically the decent people, the thinkers, the creative people, the people that don't follow orders, the people that are not zombies. So that's why I say pretty soon we're going to be disappearing, because that's what they've always done. Now, here's the second purpose, and the more, let's say, esoteric purpose of the check-in club is people like us need to stay in touch with each other, not only for moral support, because it feels good. Somebody says, "How are you doing? Can you believe what's going on? And are you going to go to the rally this Saturday?" And moral support, and which is a form of spiritual support, but also we need to keep in touch with each other as an early warning system. Let's say that you and me, we're on the check-in club list. I call you, you call me, a third person calls both of us, and we say, "I can't get a hold of Andy today. Where's Andy at?" And then with the check-in club, you should have a secondary phone that you can contact. So maybe it's your girlfriend or a neighbor or a trusted friend. You can call them. "What happened to Andy? Do we know where Andy is?" See, because the thing is, what will happen is a black van will pull up to your apartment or your house at 3 o'clock in the morning. Armed men will enter your house. They will hustle you out, put you in the black van, and that's the last anybody sees of you. This is the way the communists operate. This is the way they've always operated, and this is the way it will go down coming very soon. Well, okay, now Andy's gone. What happened to Andy? Who's going to find out if nobody calls you? If you're can't get a hold of you, and then who's going to raise the alarm? The other thing with the check-in club is now I can say, "Look, I've tried for 2 days to find Andy. I can't find him. Let's everybody get together, see if we can find out any information. If you have any friends in law enforcement, if you have any friends that work at the local detention center, let's contact everybody. What the hell happened to Andy? If we can't find you," and then the next day, Stefan goes missing. Now, you see, this acts as an early warning system. Now, the rest of the people, you better disappear. Because now we know they're coming for you. Because look, it's not going to be on the nightly news. It's not going to be on BBC or ITV, for crying out loud, that, "Oh, well, today a lot of people disappeared and we don't know what happened to them." But nothing to worry about. No, you're never going to hear this stuff. It's done in secret in the beginning. They get rid of the intelligence, anybody that might possibly offer resistance to the communists. They get rid of them first. And it's done in secret. So how are we going to know when people start disappearing? We won't know unless we already maintain, and this is like a form of communication. This is an early warning system, And it's also a way to rally people for the assistance of the disappeared. Well, look at what happened in Chile there. That's a great movie. What would they call it? Missing, how the government there rounded up people and they all disappeared. You see, when they round you up, they bring you to a holding center first. Then they transport you to a more permanent holding center. The longer you stay in this system, this imprisonment system, the harder it is for you to escape. The best chance you have of avoiding being shipped to the concentration camp is if people can intervene on your behalf as early as possible. So if I find out I can't get a hold of Andy today, then tomorrow morning myself and maybe 10, 20 other people are going to go to the local police station and kick up a big fuss. Our friend is missing. We want to post a missing persons report. We want to see the admission records for your jails. Is he here? We need to speak to him. We have a human rights lawyer on retainer. He's coming down. He's going to file motions and petitions to have you released. And if you do that, there's a chance that you can escape that. If you don't do it, if nobody comes to check in on you, what happened to Andy? Nobody knows. And you're left alone in the detainment center, and then 2 days later you're shipped off to the concentration camp. Well, that's it. That's it. So the check-in club has three purposes. Normally, on the outside, it's to provide moral and mental support for people that need it, that are isolated, that are alone. But on another level, it's to provide rescue operations for people who are being disappeared. And finally, it acts as an early warning system for everyone. People are disappearing, and now might be the time to disappear, to grab your bug out bag and go hang out in the moors for a few weeks and see how things go from there.
That's very interesting and very valuable information. I have a friend in South Africa, Dr. Peter Hammond, and he spoke to dissidents all through Eastern Europe on his travels. He's a missionary. And he discovered that the people that shut their mouths when the communists took over were the people that disappeared, and the people that kept talking were still around. And you wouldn't think that in a lot of cases, but in a lot of cases that happened, and the reason was that they would be missed, whereas the people that had already shut up wouldn't be missed because they'd already shut up. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense, Stefan?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. 100% correct, and that's the purpose of this. The check-in club, because if you disappear, you will be missed. Because people will notice you're not home anymore. You're not answering the phone. You're not calling the other people on your list that you should be calling, because everybody calls each other. So, if you're supposed to call me, Andy, and then I go, geez, I haven't heard anything from Andy for 2 days. Let's call Andy, because Andy's being missed. That helps to ensure your life. So this check-in club, and it's such a simple organization. It's just one of hundreds of ways that we could work together to support each other and fight against these monsters. And it's so simple, but again, it shows you another facet of how this will save your life, or could save your life.
Yeah, and the other thing that I thought there as well is you specify call, because folks, say for example, someone's just to shoot you an email or shoot you a Skype message or something like that. Well, anyone could type that, but if you actually speak to the person, you recognise their voice, then at least you're more reassured, because anyone could get hold of your computer after they picked you up, and they'll be able to get into all of that, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, Andy here. Yeah, I'm fine. No, don't worry." And so, would you say that it's absolutely essential that people make that spoken call to each other?
Yes, that's essential. An email doesn't cut it. A little Twitter post or whatever, that kind of nonsense. Look, why do you think this is so popular? Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and all this social media crap. Why do you think that's so popular, or it's being pushed on people? Because of the very fact that it only goes to increase people's isolation. I mean, you're not communicating, you're not sharing an emotional experience with somebody by typing LOL in an email or in a message or in a tweet. This is not communication. This is not bonding between human beings. This is an artificial, it's like saccharine. It's an artificial form of humanity that ultimately denigrates humanity and human interaction. So no, absolutely, you have to have voice contact. Even better would be in-person contact, but that might not be possible. But at least voice contact, because you can hear. And for those of you listening, you can you can tell by the way I talk, I have a lot of emotion behind what I say because I really feel what I'm talking about, and I really feel for humanity, and I really feel for my fellow man and woman who are on our side, and how we are alone and isolated and struggle and suffer for simply being honest and telling the truth about things. And so you can hear it in my voice. I know you can, because it's sincere. So that's why you need voice contact at the very least. Better in person. I mean, if you could see my face and all my grimacing and gesturing and laughing, that even better. You know, human touch and human contact is the absolute best. This is for healing and for spiritual support. But second best then is a voice. Absolutely useless is a goddamn text message.
Yeah, no, I understand. And Stefan, we've only got about 3 minutes left. Now, the different topics we've talked about, anything else that you would like to mention before we go? But if you're struggling to think of something, your view on where we are with the COVID nonsense, mandatory vaccines, all this different stuff. I know you can't sum that up in 3 minutes, but you can run over if you would like. You know, how does this fit into the disappearing part? Because it looks to me now like what we see happening in Australia is going to be happening to, because that's their winter now, so it's going to be happening to us as we come into our winter. Talking about mandatory vaccines, we talked about the camps. You know, how critical is the situation now? We're going to start seeing serious things before the end of this year.
Absolutely, absolutely. We don't have a lot of time left. It's really simple. They want to murder us all. That's all it's about. Never mind variation 4 and the fourth wave and the fifth wave and the booster and all that. All of that means nothing. The primary purpose of this entire staged event is mass murder. That's what it's all about. So this is where we have to start from, folks. I'm working on a book coming out, The Complete Guide to Forming Communities. I'm doing an online course for the University of Reason on how to create and build communities and all the many different ways that we can do that, support each other. But if we are going to survive what's coming, the only way we can do that is we've got to learn to work together, and we have to learn to help each other. Remember, they have all the money and all the armies and all the media and everything like that. We are sitting by ourselves on a desk in front of a computer, hoping that somehow we can make a difference. Well, there is a way we can make a difference, and that is by uniting, forming small, independent, self-sufficient, self-reliant communities, even if it's something as simple and easy as a check-in club. That's a community. It doesn't require you to do much more than pick up the phone once a day for 20 minutes. That's all that requires. But there's so much more we can do if we can only cooperate. So go to my website, follow me. Things are changing every day. I'm coming up with new ideas. But let's get together, folks. You know, put down the petty differences, all this little petty ego stuff. It's ridiculous. We are being murdered. Nothing else matters but the knowledge that we are being murdered, and we need to defend ourselves. And in order to defend ourselves, we got to join hands and work together.
Absolutely well said, Stefan. And this was a fascinating show. I followed you for so many years, and I will certainly be inviting you back. But, folks, if you want to catch Stefan every week, then sign up for the Jeff Archives, as I have, as I say, he's on the last hour, so has the last word every week on the Friday. And I always look forward to that show. So, that being said, I want to thank Stefan so much for joining me today for a show entitled We Are All Going to Be Disappearing Soon.